The pencil rolled off Lieutenant Colonel Ava Ghost Reeves' desk for the third time in 20 minutes, clattering against the linoleum floor of the community college classroom. Nobody turned to look. She was just another middle-aged student in Introduction to Business Management, invisible among the 20-somethings typing on their laptops. The professor droned on about supply chain logistics, while Ava stared at the contrails dissecting the sky beyond the window, her fingers unconsciously tracing the shape of a joystick that wasn't there. She'd been out for 18 months. Honorable discharge after 22 years, 4 combat tour, and more flight hours in an A-10 Warthog than most pilots logged in their entire careers. Now she sat in a classroom that smelled like industrial carpet cleaner and burnt coffee, pretending to care about civilian certifications while her savings dwindled and her applications to airlines accumulated rejections. Too old, they said. Overqualified. Insurance liability. The door didn't burst open. It simply opened with practiced silence, and that's what made everyone look up. 4 men entered wearing civilian clothes that fooled nobody. Their bearing, their synchronized movement, the way they swept the room with their eyes betrayed them immediately. Navy SEALs. Ava recognized the type before she recognized the lead operator's face. Master Chief Jake Morrison, someone she'd provided close air support for in Helmand Province 8 years ago. "Ma'am," Morrison said, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent classroom. He was looking directly at her. "We need you to come with us." The professor's mouth hung open mid-sentence about quarterly projections. Students' phones appeared in hands, ready to record whatever drama was unfolding. Ava hadn't moved, her pencil still poised over notes she hadn't been taking. "I'm retired, Master Chief," she said quietly. "Not anymore." He held out a tablet showing presidential authorization. 40 minutes ago, a situation developed that requires your specific expertise. We have a helicopter waiting. She could have asked questions, could have demanded explanations, could have insisted on protocols and chain of command. Instead, she felt something she hadn't felt in 18 months, the electric clarity that came before a mission. Her hands were already closing her notebook, muscle memory taking over. "How bad?" she asked, standing. Morrison's jaw tightened. "Tier 1 bad, and ma'am, they asked for you by name, by your call sign." Ghost. Nobody had called her that since her last flight over Bagram. The name had been both mockery and legend. Mockery because she'd been a woman in a boys' club. Legend because she could put ordnance on target in weather conditions that grounded everyone else, appearing out of nowhere like a specter of death for enemy forces. As she followed Morrison toward the door, one of the younger students finally managed to speak. "Professor, what about class?" The professor, still processing what he was witnessing, stammered, "Class. Class is dismissed." Ava paused at the doorway, looking back at the ordinary classroom that had been her attempt at an ordinary life. Then Morrison's hand touched her elbow gently. "Time's critical, Colonel." "Colonel, not ma'am, not Ava, Colonel." The pencil she'd left behind continued to roll slowly across the desk, falling once more to the floor with a soft click that nobody heard over the sound of helicopter rotors approaching the building. Morrison handed her a flight suit as they walked down the hallway, students pressing themselves against walls to let them pass. The fabric felt familiar between her fingers, the patches already affixed, her old squadron, her wings, and there on the left breast pocket, the name tape that had defined her for over 2 decades, REVES. Below it, embroidered in smaller letters, the call sign that had followed her from her first combat mission to what she'd thought was her last. Ghost. "The birds on the roof," Morrison said as they entered the stairwell. 2 of his team members were already ascending, the 4th covering their 6. "Flight time to base is 37 minutes. You'll be briefed en route." "What's the aircraft?" she asked, already knowing it wouldn't be an A-10. They didn't call in retired Warthog drivers for conventional operations. "That's complicated," Morrison replied. "What do you know about Project Artemis?" Ava stopped mid-step. Project Artemis was theoretical, a next-generation fighter program so classified she'd only heard whispers about it during her final year of service. Adaptive camouflage, AI-assisted targeting, capabilities that bordered on science fiction. "It doesn't exist," she said. "It does, and right now it's the only thing that can reach the target in time." They emerged onto the roof where a black MH-60 waited, rotors spinning. But there's a problem. Of course there was. There always was when they pulled someone like her out of retirement. As they climbed aboard, Morrison handed her another tablet, this one showing a map of the South China Sea. Red indicators bloomed across the screen like a virus spreading. 17 hours ago, a Chinese submarine went dark after transmitting a partial distress signal, Morrison shouted over the rotor noise. "It's carrying something that can't fall into the wrong hands. Every navy in the Pacific is converging on its last known position." "And we're sending one fighter?" Ava asked, strapping in as the helicopter lifted off, her old community college shrinking below them. "One fighter that officially doesn't exist, piloted by someone who officially retired." Morrison's expression was grim. "The submarine's captain is Commander Liu Wei, former planned Special Forces, trained at Annapolis as part of an exchange program in 2008. The name hit her like ice water. Liu Wei. They'd been in the same advanced tactical class, the only woman and the only Chinese national in a room full of American military elite. They'd pushed each other, competed, even developed something resembling friendship before politics, and duty pulled them back to opposite sides of the Pacific. "He requested me," Ava said. "It wasn't a question." Morrison nodded. "His distress signal included your call sign. Only you. The Pentagon thinks it's a trap. The CIA thinks it's an opportunity." "What do you think?" "I think we have 17 hours before that submarine either implodes from pressure or gets found by someone else. Either way, what's on board can't be recovered by anyone but us." The helicopter banked sharply, heading toward the mountains where classified installations hid behind false construction sites and holographic projections. Ava pulled on the flight suit, feeling the weight of purpose settling back onto her shoulders. She'd spent 18 months trying to disappear into civilian life, to become nobody special. But some ghosts, it seemed, refused to stay buried. And somewhere beneath thousands of feet of ocean, an old rival was calling her back to the sky. The Arizona desert stretched endlessly below as the helicopter descended toward what looked like an abandoned mining facility. Ava knew better. The seemingly derelict buildings were a shell, camouflage for one of the most advanced aviation research facilities in the world. As they touched down, she noticed things that would be invisible to civilian eyes. The anti-aircraft emplacements disguised as rock formations, the subtle electromagnetic signatures of underground hangars, the way the air itself seemed to shimmer with electronic countermeasures. General Patricia Hayes was waiting on the tarmac, her uniform immaculate despite the desert heat. Ava had flown under Hayes' command in Afghanistan, back when the general was a colonel who understood that sometimes the best tactical decisions came from the pilot with eyes on the target, not the brass in air-conditioned command centers. "Ghost," Hayes said, returning Ava's salute. "Wish we were meeting under better circumstances." "Ma'am," Morrison briefed me on the basics. "Liu Wei's submarine, something critical on board, and apparently I'm flying something that doesn't exist." Hayes began walking toward a hangar entrance that materialized in what had appeared to be solid rock. "Project Artemis. We've had 3 test pilots try to master it. One's in a coma, one resigned citing psychological trauma, and the third managed 60 seconds of stable flight before the neural interface overwhelmed him." Neural interface. Ava followed Hayes into an elevator that descended far deeper than any mining shaft would require. "The aircraft doesn't have traditional controls. It responds to thought patterns, muscle memory, instinct. The pilot becomes the aircraft in a very literal sense. We developed it specifically for situations requiring superhuman reaction times and decision-making speed. The elevator opened into a vast underground hangar. At its center, surrounded by technical stations and monitoring equipment, sat an aircraft that looked like it had been carved from shadow itself. The fighter absorbed light rather than reflecting it, its surfaces seeming to shift and flow like liquid metal. It was both beautiful and disturbing, a predator from another era of warfare that hadn't quite arrived yet. "Why me?" Ava asked, unable to take her eyes off the aircraft. "Your test pilots were younger, stronger, probably better adapted to new technology." Hayes pulled up a holographic display showing brain scan data. Because the neural interface doesn't just need a pilot. It needs someone who thinks in 3 dimensions instinctively, who can process multiple threat vectors while maintaining spatial awareness. Someone who's survived situations that should have been impossible. The scans showed patterns Ava recognized as her own brain activity during combat missions, overlaid with the aircraft's computational requirements. The match was eerily perfect. "More importantly," Hayes continued, "we need someone Liu Wei will trust enough to approach. His submarine is damaged but not destroyed. He's choosing to surface gradually, controlling who finds him first. That partial distress signal wasn't just a call for help. It was bait, and you're the only fish he wants to catch." "What's on the submarine?" Hayes hesitated, then pulled up another classified file. 3 months ago, a joint U.S.-Chinese research team made a breakthrough in quantum computing, a processor capable of breaking any encryption in seconds. Both governments agreed to destroy the research, too dangerous to exist. Liu Wei was transporting the Chinese prototype to a disposal site when his submarine went dark. But he didn't destroy it. Intelligence suggests someone on board attempted a mutiny. Liu maintained control but suffered casualties. He's been running silent, trying to keep the device from falling into the wrong hands, including, potentially, factions within his own government. Ava walked closer to the aircraft, designated AF-7 Artemis. Up close, she could see the thousands of microsensors embedded in its skin, the neural interface ports where pilot and machine would merge. "How long do I have to learn to fly it?" she asked. 6 hours of simulation, 2 hours of ground testing, then you launch. I know it's not enough." "It's what we have," Ava interrupted. "Show me the simulator." The next hours blurred into a fusion of technology and instinct. The neural interface felt like drowning at first, the aircraft's sensory input flooding her consciousness with data streams that threatened to overwhelm human comprehension. But gradually, Ava learned to filter, to process, to merge her decades of flight experience with the Artemis's capabilities. She wasn't flying the aircraft so much as wearing it, becoming it. In the simulator, she could feel the air pressure changes across the fighter's skin, sense electromagnetic radiation like a new color spectrum, process targeting solutions faster than conscious thought. It was intoxicating and terrifying in equal measure. When she finally emerged, her nose bleeding from the neural strain, the sun had set over the desert. Dr. Chen Prasad, the project's lead neuroscientist, checked her vitals with concern. "Your integration rate is unprecedented, 87% synchronization on your first full session. But the strain—" "Will it hold for the mission?" Ava asked. "Theoretically, yes, but we've never tested the interface under actual combat stress. The psychological load could." "Doctor, I've dropped ordnance danger close to friendly positions in 0 visibility while taking surface-to-air fire. I've landed a warthog with half a wing missing. Psychological load is what I do." Morrison approached with a tactical tablet. "We have a problem. Satellite imagery shows 3 Chinese destroyers converging on Liu's position. They'll reach him in 4 hours. But that's not the worst part." He showed her thermal imaging of the submarine. It was surfacing slowly, controlled, but heat signatures indicated flooding in multiple compartments. Bodies floated in the water nearby. He's been fighting off boarding attempts, Morrison explained. Someone wants that quantum processor, and they're willing to kill Chinese sailors to get it. Rogue faction. Unknown, but Liu's running out of time and options. Ava turned back to the Artemis. In the hangar lights, it looked less like an aircraft and more like a sleeping dragon, waiting to be awakened. The neural interface ports gleamed like eyes in the dark. "Prep the aircraft," she said. "And Morrison, find me everything you have on Liu Wei's crew manifest. If someone staged a mutiny, I need to know who and why." As technicians swarmed the Artemis, beginning pre-flight preparations that looked more like a surgical procedure than aircraft maintenance, Ava stood in the underground hangar and felt the weight of what was coming. Somewhere in the Pacific, an old rival was holding the line with a damaged submarine and a dying crew, protecting a device that could reshape global intelligence warfare. And she was about to fly an aircraft that existed in the space between human capability and machine consciousness, pushing both to their limits. The call sign Ghost had never felt more appropriate. She was about to become something between human and machine, flying to save someone who might be enemy or ally, carrying the hopes of multiple nations who would never acknowledge her existence. Hayes approached with the mission authorization tablet. Official designation is Operation Blackwater. Unofficially. Unofficially, I don't exist, flying an aircraft that doesn't exist, to rescue someone who's supposed to be dead. The submarine's last transmission included something else, Hayes said quietly. Liu Wei said, "Tell Ghost the cherry blossoms are blooming in Annapolis. Mean anything to you?" It did. During their time at the Naval Academy, she and Liu had walked beneath the cherry trees one spring evening, discussing how beauty could exist even in institutions designed for war. It had been the moment she'd realized that perhaps understanding between nations wasn't impossible, just incredibly difficult. "It means he's really in trouble," Ava said, "and it means this isn't a trap." The Artemis's engines began their initialization sequence, a sound unlike any aircraft she'd ever heard, less mechanical roar than organic breathing, as if the machine was coming alive. Technicians attached the neural interface cables to her flight suit, each connection sending shivers of foreign sensation through her nervous system. "Colonel Reeves," Dr. Prassad said formally, reading from a pre-mission protocol. "Do you consent to full neural integration with the AF-7 Artemis system, understanding the physical and psychological risks involved?" "I consent." "Do you understand that, in the event of catastrophic system failure, extraction from the neural interface may not be possible?" "I understand." "Do you accept that the mission parameters may require actions that officially never occurred, with no recognition or acknowledgement from the United States government?" "I accept." As the final connections were made, Ava felt the Artemis's consciousness, for lack of a better word, merge with her own. It was vast, alien, but somehow familiar, like meeting a part of herself she'd never known existed. The aircraft's sensors became her senses, its weapons her hands, its engines her heartbeat. "Ghost," Hayes said, using the call sign with unusual formality, "you are authorized for unlimited operational discretion. Recover the device if possible, destroy it if necessary, but above all, don't let it fall into the wrong hands." The hangar roof began to open, revealing a star-filled desert sky. The Artemis responded to Ava's thought before she was aware of thinking it, engines increasing power, landing gear retracting even though they hadn't left the ground yet. She wasn't preparing to fly. She was preparing to transcend the very concept of flight. "One more thing," Morrison called out as the aircraft began to rise on anti-grav generators she hadn't known it possessed. "Liu's submarine is the Dongfeng, in English." "East Wind," Ava finished. Of course Liu would command a submarine named after the wind that brought change, just as she flew as a ghost, invisible and inevitable. The Artemis rose through the hangar opening into the night sky, and for a moment, Ava existed in two states simultaneously, human and machine, earth and sky, past and future. The sensation was overwhelming and exhilarating, like being born into a new form of existence. Then training took over. Muscle memory adapted to neural pathways, and Ghost began to fly. The Pacific Ocean stretched black beneath her, starlight reflecting off waves 4 miles below. The Artemis moved through the air like thought itself, responding to intentions Ava barely formed before executing them. They were traveling at Mach 3, but she felt no G-forces, the aircraft's inertial dampeners creating a bubble of calm within incomprehensible speed. Through the neural interface, she could feel everything: weather patterns forming hundreds of miles away, electromagnetic signatures of satellites watching from orbit, even the heartbeats of whales diving in the darkness below. It was sensory overload that should have driven her mad, but somehow her mind had found the rhythm, filtering the torrent of information into streams of relevant data. Ghost, this is Overwatch. Hayes' voice came through not as sound but as direct neural input. You're approaching the edge of Chinese territorial waters. From here on, you're invisible to us. The Artemis's stealth systems will hide you from their sensors, but if you're discovered— I never existed, Ava finished. Understood. She felt rather than saw the moment they crossed into foreign airspace. The Artemis's skin rippled, adaptive camouflage making them invisible to every known form of detection. They were a hole in the sky, absence rather than presence. The submarine's location appeared in her consciousness like a memory she'd always had. Still 300 miles out, but the interface was already painting tactical scenarios, showing her approach vectors, threat assessments, escape routes. The three Chinese destroyers were converging in a search pattern that would reach Liu's position in less than 2 hours. But there was something else. Another signature, faint but unmistakable. An American Lowe's Angels-class attack submarine, running silent 400 feet below the surface. Hayes, we have our own assets in play. Negative, Ghost. No authorized U.S. naval presence in that grid. A rogue submarine. Someone in the U.S. Navy was playing their own game. The quantum processor wasn't just attracting Chinese attention. The Artemis suddenly jerked, a sensation like ice through her veins. Through the neural link, she felt what the aircraft felt. They were being painted by an unknown targeting system. Something had found them despite the stealth systems. Contact bearing 270, she said aloud, though no one could hear her. The Artemis was already responding, diving and rolling in patterns that would have torn a conventional aircraft apart. Through the enhanced sensors, she saw it, another aircraft, impossibly fast, impossibly agile. Another Artemis. Hayes, someone else has your toy. Impossible, there's only one prototype. The enemy fighter fired, not missiles but directed energy that sparked along the Artemis's skin like lightning. Ava felt it as burning pain across her body, the neural interface translating damage into sensation. She thought evasion, and the aircraft responded, pulling maneuvers that existed outside normal physics. The two fighters danced through the night sky, moving in patterns that would have looked like teleportation to ground observers. Each pilot thinking moves, countering thoughts with thoughts, fighting in a realm beyond physical combat. Through the chaos, Ava caught glimpses of the enemy pilot's neural signature, aggressive, technically perfect, but somehow mechanical. Then she understood. It wasn't another human pilot. It was an AI flying a second Artemis that shouldn't exist. Liu's not the only one with a prototype, she realized. Someone built another quantum processor. They're using it to run an AI pilot. The realization changed everything. She wasn't just fighting for a device. She was in the opening shots of a new kind of war. Quantum computing, neural interfaces, AI combatants. The future of warfare was happening now, in the dark over the Pacific. The AI-controlled Artemis attacked again, its patterns perfect but predictable in their perfection. Ava did something no computer could anticipate. She made a mistake on purpose, letting her aircraft drift into what appeared to be a vulnerable position. The AI took the bait, moving to exploit the opening. That's when Ghost struck, not with weapons but with the Artemis itself, using the neural interface to flood the enemy fighters' systems with conflicting data, human intuition corrupting perfect algorithms. The AI hesitated, caught between optimal solutions, and in that fraction of a second, Ava fired. The enemy Artemis didn't explode. It simply ceased, falling from the sky like a puppet with severed strings, crashing into the ocean below in a sphere of burning fuel and broken dreams. But the effort had cost her. Blood ran from her nose, her ears. The neural interface was burning paths through her consciousness that human minds weren't meant to travel. Dr. Prasad's warnings echoed in her memory, but she pushed them aside. Liu's submarine was close now, less than 50 miles. Through the Artemis's sensors, she could see it clearly. The Dongfeng had surfaced partially, its hull breached in 3 places. Bodies floated around it, some in Chinese naval uniforms, others in unmarked black tactical gear. Liu had been fighting off boarders, probably special forces from the rogue U.S. submarine. She opened a tight beam communication directly to the Dongfeng's emergency frequency. "Commander Liu, this is Ghost. I'm here." Static, then a voice she remembered from a decade ago, older now, exhausted. "Ghost, I was beginning to think you wouldn't come. What's your status?" 17 dead, including my executive officer who led the mutiny. The device is secure but damaged. I have maybe 30 minutes before complete structural failure. Can you transfer the device? Negative. It's integrated with our systems now. The only way to secure it is to destroy it, but Ghost. His voice carried weight she'd rarely heard from him. The quantum processor contained something else. Intelligence files from both our governments. Evidence of a third party, someone playing us against each other. Who? I don't know, but they have people in both our command structures. The mutiny, your rogue submarine, even this mission, we're all being manipulated. The Artemis's sensors screamed warnings. The Chinese destroyers had detected the combat, were changing course. The American submarine was ascending, preparing to surface. And something else, multiple aircraft launching from a carrier group that wasn't supposed to be there. Liu, we're out of time. I know, Ghost, I'm sending you everything we've discovered. After that, she could hear him take a breath. After that, I'm scuttling the Dongfeng. It's the only way to ensure the device is destroyed. Liu, no, we can. We can't. My men are dead or dying. The submarine is compromised. But the information might prevent a war neither of our countries actually wants. Pause. Do you remember what you told me about the cherry blossoms? She did. That beauty was temporary, which made it more precious, not less. I remember. Then you understand. Beginning transmission now. Data flooded through the Artemis's communication systems. Encrypted files that would take years to fully decode, but contained enough surface information to confirm Liu's claims. Financial transactions, communication logs, a web of connections suggesting a shadow organization pushing the world toward conflict. The Chinese destroyers were 20 minutes out. The American submarine had surfaced, launching small boats toward the Dongfeng. And above, she could sense more aircraft, a mix of American and Chinese fighters, all converging on this point. Liu, they're coming. I see them. Ghost, tell my daughter. The transmission cut to static, then nothing. Through the Artemis's sensors, she watched the Dongfeng implode. Liu's controlled scuttling pulling the submarine and everything aboard into the crushing depths. The quantum processor, the evidence, Liu Wei himself, all gone in seconds, leaving only ripples on the dark water. The American boats reached the site, finding nothing but debris. The Chinese destroyers arrived minutes later, their searchlights sweeping empty ocean. And above, fighters from both nations circled like vultures, each waiting for the other to make the first aggressive move. Ava hung invisible above them all, the ghost in the machine, holding information that could prevent or cause a war. The Artemis's stealth held, none of the conventional aircraft able to detect her. She could leave, return to base, deliver Liu's intelligence to people who might or might not act on it. Or she could do something else. She thought of Liu Wei, choosing death over compromising his integrity. Of the 17 sailors who died defending their submarine from their own shipmates. Of the beauty of cherry blossoms and the temporary nature of all things, including peace. Ghost made her decision. The Artemis descended, gradually reducing its stealth emissions until she appeared on everyone's radar simultaneously, a single unidentified aircraft directly between the opposing forces. Warnings flooded her communication channels in multiple languages. Target locks from both sides painted her aircraft. She broadcast on all frequencies, her voice carrying across the dark waters. All aircraft, all vessels, this is Colonel Ava Reeves, United States Air Force. I am transmitting on an open channel evidence of third-party manipulation attempting to instigate conflict between our nations. Commander Liu Wei of the People's Liberation Army Navy died to prevent this war. Honor his sacrifice. Stand down. For a moment that stretched like eternity, nobody moved. Then a Chinese fighter pilot, young by the sound of his voice, spoke in accented English. Colonel Reeves, this is Lieutenant Zhang. Commander Liu was my instructor. If he trusted you, I will listen. One by one, targeting systems disengaged. Aircraft began returning to patrol patterns rather than attack formations. Below, the destroyers and the American submarine held position but stopped advancing. It wouldn't last. Within hours, higher commands would assert control. The evidence would be classified, buried, or dismissed. But for now, in this moment, the immediate crisis was averted. The Artemis climbed back into the darkness, stealth systems re-engaging. Ava felt the neural interface beginning to fray, her consciousness struggling to maintain the connection. Blood dripped onto her flight suit, and she could taste copper with each breath. Ghost, this is Overwatch, Hayes' voice reached her. What's your status? Mission complete. The device is destroyed. Liu Wei is KIA, but General, she paused, organizing thoughts that wanted to scatter like startled birds. We have a bigger problem. Someone wants our countries at war and they have assets in both militaries. Return to base immediately. We'll debrief. Negative, the Artemis won't make it. She could feel it now, the neural interface degrading, her synapses burning from the prolonged connection. I'm redirecting to emergency coordinates, sending you everything now. She transmitted Liu's files through secure channels, then added her own flight recordings, every second of the encounter with the AI-controlled fighter, the rogue submarine, the confrontation over the Dongfeng's grave. The California coast appeared below, and with it, a forgotten airstrip she'd memorized years ago, a contingency for operations that went wrong. The Artemis was dying around her, systems failing as the neural interface collapsed. She wasn't flying anymore so much as falling with style, using the last of their shared consciousness to aim for the runway. The landing was more crash than touchdown. The Artemis hit the abandoned tarmac at 200 miles per hour, anti-grav systems failing, conventional physics reasserting itself with violent authority. The aircraft skidded for half a mile, leaving a trail of exotic composites and classified technology. When the canopy finally opened, Ava couldn't move. The neural interface cables had to be cut by the emergency response team that Hayes had scrambled. They pulled her from the cockpit, her body convulsing as her nervous system tried to remember how to be purely human again. She woke 3 days later in a medical facility that didn't officially exist, surrounded by machines monitoring damage that medical science barely understood. Dr. Prasad was there, looking exhausted but relieved. You've suffered significant neural pathway damage, he said without preamble. Flying the Artemis for that long, engaging in combat, the stress of maintaining stealth. It should have killed you. But it didn't. No, your brain adapted in ways we didn't think possible. You've essentially rewired portions of your consciousness. You'll never be quite the same. She could feel it, the ghost of the Artemis still lingering in her mind, phantom sensors detecting things that weren't there, the memory of flying beyond physical form. What happened to the intelligence Liu sent? General Hayes entered the room. It's being analyzed. Quietly. The evidence points to a consortium of defense contractors and intelligence operatives from multiple countries working to destabilize the Pacific for profit. Investigations are beginning, but carefully. The wrong move could trigger exactly what they wanted. And the AI fighter, destroyed completely when it hit the water. But the fact that it existed means someone else has quantum processing capability. The arms race Liu died to prevent has already begun. Ava tried to sit up, her body protesting movements that should have been simple. Then he died for nothing. No, Hayes said firmly. He died to buy us time, to expose the real enemy. Because of you and him, we're not shooting at each other. We're looking for the people who wanted us to. Over the following weeks, as Ava underwent rehabilitation to remember how to exist without the Artemis's expanded consciousness, reports filtered in. Arrests in Washington, Beijing, Moscow. Defense contracts canceled. A shadow war fought in boardrooms and secure facilities, cleaning house of those who tried to profit from global conflict. The official story was that a Chinese submarine had suffered a catastrophic malfunction and sunk with all hands. The U.S. Navy had attempted rescue operations but arrived too late. Commander Liu Wei was posthumously commended for his service. No mention of quantum processors, neural interface fighters, or a crisis that nearly triggered World War III. Ava was medically retired again. This time with full disability benefits and a medal she couldn't wear for an operation that never happened. The Artemis project was suspended indefinitely, the neural interface technology deemed too dangerous for human pilots. But late at night, when the phantom sensations grew strongest, she could still feel it. The sky calling, the ghost of the machine whispering of flights yet to come. And sometimes, in her dreams, she flew alongside Liu Wei's spirit, two pilots from opposite sides who'd chosen humanity over patriotism, understanding over conflict. 6 months after the incident, she received an unmarked package. Inside was a single cherry blossom, preserved in resin, and a note in Mandarin. Translated, it read, "My father spoke of you before his final mission. He said Ghost was the only one who understood that sometimes the most important battles are the ones we refuse to fight. Liu Mei." Ava placed the preserved blossom on her desk, next to her retirement papers and the classified files she wasn't supposed to have kept. Outside her window, contrails crossed the sky like brushstrokes, ordinary aircraft flying ordinary missions in what everyone believed was peacetime. She knew better. The war had already begun, fought in quantum processors and neural interfaces, in shadows and conspiracies. But because of Liu Wei's sacrifice and her impossible flight, it was a war humanity might survive. The call sign Ghost had one final entry in official military records, a single line in a classified database. Operational status, watching. Because someone had to. Someone who'd flown between human and machine, who'd seen the future of warfare and chosen to prevent it. Someone who understood that the most powerful weapon wasn't technology or politics, but the choice of when not to use them. And so Ghost watched and waited and remembered. Years passed. The world moved on, unaware of how close it had come to disaster. The Artemis project remained buried in classified archives, its technology deemed too dangerous to pursue. But technology has a way of refusing to stay buried. Ava lived quietly in a small Oregon town, teaching basic flight instruction at a local airfield. Her students knew her as Ms. Reeves, a former military pilot who didn't talk about her service. They didn't know about the neural scarring that still caused her hands to twitch when jets flew overhead, reaching for controls that existed in another form of consciousness. The call came on a Tuesday morning as she was pre-flighting a Cessna with a student. Her secured phone, the one that hadn't rung in 3 years, buzzed with an emergency tone she'd hoped never to hear again. "Ghost, we need you." General Hayes, older now, her voice carrying weight that hadn't been there before. "I'm retired permanently, the neural damage." "I know, but something's happened. Can you come to Washington? Secure transport is already en route." 2 hours later, Ava sat in a black helicopter, watching the Oregon forests give way to desert, then mountains, then the sprawling complexity of the Capitol. They didn't land at the Pentagon or any official facility, but at a private estate in Virginia that served as a meeting ground for conversations that couldn't happen anywhere else. Hayes was waiting, along with faces she didn't recognize, intelligence officials from multiple agencies, their expressions grave. 3 days ago, Hayes began without preamble, a commercial airliner disappeared over the Atlantic. 400 souls, including the Secretary of State's daughter. No distress signal, no debris, nothing. Mechanical failure, terrorism. Neither. Hayes activated a holographic display showing radar tracks. The aircraft was there 1 second, gone the next, but our satellites caught this. The image was grainy but unmistakable. An Artemis-class fighter, its adaptive skin rippling as it absorbed the airliner into what looked like a cargo hold that shouldn't have existed. That's impossible. The Artemis doesn't have. The original didn't, but someone's been developing the technology. They've built a new version, larger, more capable, and they're using it to hold the world hostage. A new voice spoke from the corner, accented but familiar. "The passengers are alive. We received a transmission an hour ago." Ava turned to see a Chinese intelligence officer, someone she'd last seen in Classify.